This is Eat, Sleep, Invest, the marketing podcast for real estate investors to get more deals. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Eat, Sleep, and Invest. I'm your host, Bryan Driscoll. I'm here with Rafael Cortez. What's going on, man?
How you doing, man? Thanks for having me, bro.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, glad to have you here. Hey, so give us a little background, because I know you deal with a lot of stuff like wholesaling, coaching. You were a firefighter. Like, give us some background on what you had going on.
Right now I run 3 different companies. One is CEO Pulse, which is my organizational psychology practice. I do a lot of coaching and consulting for businesses in general, and I focus on wholesaling, coaching, wholesaling to people who are trying to scale their business and that sort of thing. So that's one of them. I run a fix and flip business, which is Pulse Capital. We wholesale out of that business as well. So we do a lot of kind of different things, creative financing and the works. And then I own a real estate brokerage in Phoenix as well. So everything happens in Phoenix for the most part, as far as my businesses go.
Nice. Yeah. And you were a firefighter. You guys started firefighting in like 19, right?
Yeah. So I started young, became a firefighter in Yuma. So that's my hometown. That was kind of fun, getting into the pit of the world, really, because you see a lot of things, man. It's crazy. I mean, your perspective really changes at an early age when you go in that early to a place like that. It's always rainbows and unicorns for the most part, right? But when you start seeing accidents, when you start seeing real life, because you're exposed to it on a day-to-day basis, like you start to prioritize your life in a very different way. It's interesting.
Yeah.
So.
Now, and yeah, that is a good point. Yeah, because everything is like rainbows and sunshines until you see it real life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's one of the things that happens now, right? I think there's a big dissonance or disconnect between what the youth understands as real life and what real life is. Actually getting out there and getting punched in the face and responsibilities and bills and payments and everything in between, right? So I don't know. I think I was blessed to have the opportunity to see what it was like right out of the gates. So.
Yeah.
That was fun and one of the best learning experiences of my life.
That's cool. So you were a firefighter at 19. How'd you end up getting into real estate? It's a big jump.
So yeah, I actually jumped into 19 at 21. I started to build my first business, which was a non-emergency medical transportation business. Basically, what it was is wheelchair and stretcher patient transport. It had nothing to do with real estate, but I was exposed to that when while working at the fire department. They would take the ambulance out of service to perform like a dialysis run or something that was an emergency. I was like, no, I mean this. There were companies that were doing it, but their quality was like super low. I mean, they had raggedy uniforms and whatnot. I was like, I can do better than this. So anyways, I started putting together that business and launched that when I was 21. I didn't get my first paid client until I was 23. So I mean, you can imagine, I worked for free. I tried, to pursue contracts and all that stuff. Anyways, it took me a bit to get some traction on that. But I left the fire department about 5.5 years into it to go full time in that business. And in the interim, I mean, I started to accumulate some capital and whatnot, and I started looking at places where I could place it. And in high school, I used to do construction work. So I used to work concrete and framing and build single families and projects and stuff like that. So I was like, I'm gonna flip a house. It's what I know, to do, right? So I figured I'd go swing a hammer, and yeah, I mean, I haven't looked back since I tapped into real estate in 2009. So
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, getting started early too. When I was 21, I wasn't doing any of that stuff. So you got to jumpstart a little hustle there.
Yeah, it's always been in there.
Yeah, that's cool, man. So now you're doing real estate. You got started flipping, huh?
Yeah. So, I mean, I did everything wrong. I mean, I keep talking about my first deal. I think it's like a rite of passage because most people just absolutely mess it up, right? and or not absolutely mess it up, but not everything goes right. I didn't lose money on it. I just kind of broke even on that deal, but I worked it for like 6 months as far as the flip and the amount of work that went into it. It was just insane. I was spending countless hours doing the work myself, and I didn't leverage anything. I bought the house cash, so money was tied up. I had to do price drop, all kinds of crazy things. It just kind of baptized me into it, but it wasn't until a couple of deals into it that I started looking, like actually paying attention at the settlement statements. And I keep seeing this assignment fee, like this this assignment for $12,000, $18,000, and then $15,000. So I finally asked, like, what is this assignment fee? Like, this guy that's selling you the contract, that's what he's getting. Like, wait, I'm making like $2,000 on this deal. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So yeah, but I started backwards. A lot of people start with wholesaling, right? I just went straight into fix and flipping. I mean, I didn't do any research. Not even YouTube University. I can't say I was that clever.
Yeah. And you know what? Yeah, because most people do wholesaling because they don't have the money.
Yeah.
And then they try to build up into the flips. You went backward. It's funny too. That's how I got into real estate too, through wholesalers. I'm like, how much? I'm paying you 15 grand for this property.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I wasn't pissed or anything. When I saw it, I was like, man, this is, there's got to be some merit behind it, right? So I started asking, like, okay, how'd you find it? It goes like, well, we go direct to seller. We market, and like, that's really where the skill set is, the marketing portion. Because I tried to do it by myself at the beginning, and I wasn't getting anywhere. Eventually, I started listening to podcasts. I listened to Sean Terry's podcast. I used this as advice at the beginning, and I closed a couple of deals, like wholesale deals with that. So, I mean, it's a lot easier to flip paper than flip an actual house. So I started just, honing in on that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah, because flipping papers eat a lot less sweat.
Yeah.
And lower risk because you don't have 20, 30 grand out of pocket hoping you can sell. Like, even if you listed a house in March this year versus now, you're getting different sale prices.
Oh, 1,000%, man. I was just talking about that kind of stuff this morning. We had a property in Surprise, I'm in the Phoenix market, but we had a property there listed for $669. Came in, did the rehab, and listed it for $669. And then there was comps that supported, and this is back in March, exactly in March. And then Fed came in, a couple of things happened there. A week goes by, and then we see a straight comp owned by Open Door. Actually, they did $100,000 price drop. I mean, on their property. They were in the market for like 5 days when they did the price drop. It's insane. Like, it's like you have that volatility. I'm butchering volatility.
Yeah.
There you go. The Spanish betrays me sometimes. And yeah, like you have that risk in there. So sometimes it's just it gets cringy.
Right. Yeah. So now you have multiple businesses. So explain to me organizational psychologist, because that's what you do.
Yeah. So I started. I mean, I was just. I've always gravitated to systems, right? Like one of the first people that I ever talked to in terms of having my own business told me, I think it's the best piece of advice that I've ever gotten. He was like, whenever you build something, just build it like if you were gonna sell it tomorrow. Okay, what would it need to look like? And he just kind of planted the seed of reverse engineering in my head, right? So it's all about systems. It's all about going through through a process once, documenting the thing, and then delegating and elevating from that role. So everything that I've done from the transportation business up to now has been, anytime I jump into a new area of whatever it is that I'm doing, I'll document the thing and then create a system, a process behind it. Organizational psychology puts the business side of things, systems and processes, but it links them with human behavior and natural behavioral tendencies. So it just puts two and two together, people and systems, right? Like sometimes this is crazy, but this is a psychological study, showed that people will adjust to an environment that they're not necessarily optimal or naturally wired for around 3 months, and then performance starts to decline. So whenever you hire somebody, and this is just one of the things that we come across in that field. But whenever you hire somebody, they're gonna put their best foot forward at the beginning, tell you everything that you want to hear, right? And then you just present this really good, space of where they're coming from. Like they're the ideal candidate. So we hire them. 3 months down the road, the performance starts to dwindle. Like what happens? Their behavioral style was being adapted for that particular role. They weren't a natural fit. And then you have some people that can spend 20, 30 years behind a cubicle and be as happy as can be. Right. So it's about finding like those sweet spots for each person that comes along and actually hiring for the role as opposed to adapting to the person that's coming in to the company. So that's, at the end of the day, it's a long, rant over there, but at the end of the day, you're putting people and systems together and making sure that they're clicking the right way.
Now, how are you finding? So, say you have a position out. How are you finding that person? Like I always call them their representative. It's like you get to meet this person for 3 months before you find out who. Even in dating stuff like that, the rep's always there.
Oh yeah.
How are you able to cut through that? And do you have any tips to help people when they're trying to hire, find that right fit person versus waiting and wasting 3 months?
Yes. So first off, you kind of have to figure out what the role requires, right? And that's going to be role specific or job specific. For example, I'm talking for example, we do acquisitions, right? For somebody who's going to be in acquisitions, you need to have social awareness. You need to have that people skill and the willingness to be out there and having conversations with people, interacting and that sort of thing, because you're in sales, right? So somebody in sales is naturally gonna gravitate that way for the most part. Otherwise, people get tired and stressed, right? Because they're adapting too much to that particular style. But for example, you have to take into consideration the role, the requirements, and the responsibilities that you're trying to fill. And then DISC assessments are actually one of the best tools out there. There's a ton of them, Myers-Briggs, and a whole bunch of different assessments out there that you can look at. At the end of the day, they all branch out from the same 4 core behavioral tendencies, which is drivers, influencers, steadies, and analytics or calculating, the behavioral profiles. So I don't want to get too complicated or into the weeds, but if you want to find out a really good place, I send people to the Tony Robbins DISC assessment. It's super basic. It's free. It's tonyrobbins.com/DISC. And what it is, it's just a series of questions, and it's going to tell you what you kind of, add up to, or, in terms of your behavioral style and behavioral strengths. So that's one of them. But if you know you have a role that you're going to need to have, somebody who's outgoing and extrovert, you're going to go back to that assessment and then just kind of, tailor it to it, right? One of the things that I've done in my business, and I do for coaching students as well, is we'll create roles and requirements, and then I'll create a test behind that. I build tests for that kind of stuff for all my companies, it's at the end of the day, like the attrition rates really drop, meaning that people don't quit or they don't start sucking so quick. Eventually somebody's going to outgrow the role. They're going to want to do something bigger and better and whatnot, and that's fine, right? But that takes years, as opposed to, okay, I'm just tired because I don't like the talking to people thing. So yeah, it's just important to be cognizant of that kind of stuff as you hire, because it's going to be a lot cheaper to do it right from the get-go than to retrain and keep refilling that role, every couple months.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because the personality is huge. Do you come across people that are applying for the wrong types of positions and be like, you know what, you're not a fit for this, but based on the DISC test or whatever, maybe we'll move you over here. You would be a fit for this.
Oh yeah, 1,000%, man. For example, you have different roles, like director of operations roles. You have acquisition roles. You have, and then the vibe of the person might, for example, you come across somebody who might be very directive, right? Like very, a big driver, or very assertive and that sort of thing. You're like, this guy might be a great leader. But in reality, if they're not paying like a lot of attention to detail, or don't know how to mitigate, problems and conversations and mediate, more importantly, you're looking for somebody else for that role. So, somebody like that might naturally gravitate to applying for a leadership position, but they may be better in in a role where you have for example, sales, right? Where you have that tenacity, that consistency, not necessarily the attention to detail to be super high up there in the priority ladder. So yeah, absolutely, man. You'll see. The assessments come back in, and then just based off of the answers, you'll get a pretty decent idea of what the strengths are. Now, we don't just hire based off of assessments. We do that at the beginning. It's kind of like a buffer, right? A filter. We still
like pre-qualify.
Yeah, exactly. We still pre-qualify, and then now we have some information on their natural thought process. That's all it is, really. And then we do have a series of questions that happen through the hiring process. So we do have an in-person. We have a phone call, and then we have an in-person sit down. So I mean, we have a 3-step hiring process whenever we come in and do that kind of stuff. But yeah, you always find people who apply for one role just because of what it sounds like, right? But the skill sets and may fit better something else, and like it all connects to longevity. Like how long are they going to stay, in that role? The crazy thing is that have you ever been in a position where you feel exhausted, like at the end of the day? Like I remember, well, even like I'll give you an example. I'll make it easier. It's if I'm doing spreadsheets, if I'm working on and I'm it's nothing, regarding IQ. It's not about intelligence. It's not about, okay, how good am I on software or whatever. It's not it has nothing to do with that kind of stuff. But if I'm working on spreadsheets and numbers and just calculations and whatever, like I can do that, right? So my IQ allows for it, my intelligence allows for it, but I'm adapting to it because I don't necessarily like it. So it's one of the things that I do, and I know I get exhausted. Like I'll be drained after 3.5 hours, 4 hours of working on those things. But if I'm talking, if I'm out there, if I'm presenting, or if I'm talking to students, if I'm coaching, I can do that for 12 hours, and I'll be fresh as a lettuce by the time I'm done, right? The reason for that is because I'm adapting, and it drains energy, mental energy, literal energy, to adapt to that other behavior that we're not naturally wired for. So if you compound that through months and years of performing in a role that you're not fit for, naturally wired for, you're adapting all the time, you're always going to be tired. You're always going to be exhausted. Your performance is going to be at subpar. So it's really interesting, but it comes down to okay, how well are you wired or pre-wired to be working on that role?
Yeah, that's a good point too, because I even noticed that some things will take energy, but then the things that I'm really good at that jive with me, they actually give you energy. Like you're right, you can go for 12 hours and you're just rolling.
Yeah, exactly.
What tips? What would you say to the real estate investor that has that employee that they didn't pre-qualify? They're in a position. How do they determine, hey, you're in the wrong position, you either got to go or we have to move you to something that does fit you? How do they determine that?
I think just like that, because it's not and I think given the opportunity to people, if you have an employee, so usually when you have issues in business, right, it's gonna be an attitude problem or a training problem. If you hired right, it's gonna be an attitude or a training problem. Now, if you have an employee who has the right attitude and they have the right training, but they're still not giving you results, there's something else, right? So maybe the hiring was off right from the get-go. But you can see, for example, dispositions roles, and I'm using the wholesale just because it's the first thing that comes to mind, but on a role where you're talking to buyers all the time, right? You don't necessarily got to have that, that pit bull instinct, right? To go after the sale and all that stuff. You have to be able to present. You have to be able to put things in an orderly fashion way, to market, attention to detail when it comes to transaction paperwork and that sort of thing. It's a very different behavioral profile than acquisitions. So if you have somebody, and this is an example actually that popped up a while back. A friend of mine called me. He goes, man, I really like this guy, but he's not cutting it in acquisitions. I had a conversation with the guy, I met him, and I suggested, listen, bro, just put him in dispo. I think this, he's going to be more on the introvert side, kind of, side of things. His attention to detail is really good. I mean, he was the acquisitions guy that had all the notes in, all the, the boxes checked where you had to, and they had a bunch of requirements and all that. This guy is going to do well in this role. Try him out. And yeah, sure enough, I mean, became became the star dispo guy. So you can always extend opportunities for other roles, and then look at the talent that you have within your company. If you already have a team, look at the talent that you have within that team. A lot of the stuff that I do when I come in and I consult in gyms and restaurants and all kinds of different places, home health agencies and whatnot, is shuffling. So we've shuffled a lot of the roles around. They already have the talent in there. It's just about, okay, cool. This strength is better suited for this role, and then making those moves around. So
that's cool. Now
it'll change the whole dynamic of business. Absolutely.
So with your consulting and helping businesses, like, is real estate a core part of it, or is it pretty much all different types of businesses, or what do you do there?
So what I do through a CEO Pulse, I coach and consult, and I mean, I've done, I don't know, about 10, 12 different verticals where I come in and consult home health agencies and that, that sort of thing. I choose real estate just because I know it's the best vehicle for wealth out there. So, it was the thing. I was in my 20s, I was hustling with that transportation business, and I wasn't anywhere near to where I got within my first couple of years in real estate. So it just became my favorite, right? But yeah, so that's what I coach wholesale. But the framework, the business framework, really comes in on, if you have that business mentality, like you're going to be able to apply that framework and adjust it and tweak it right to any area that you're in. There's different stages to every business. I mean, for example, in real estate, and I use this same framework for my wholesaling business, my fix and flip business, and then my brokerage as well. But we go through 6 stages of business. The first one is sourcing, right? You want to source the business, source the leads. Second was pre-qualifying, converting. Second one. The third one is acquisitions. You actually have different ways of structuring deals and that sort of thing. The third one is dispositions. So how do you push the deal and monetize it? That's where most businesses or operations stop, right? But the fifth and the sixth are I think the most important, because the fifth is measuring. What are your KPIs looking like? Your key performance indicators. What are you tracking? What's your what are your your marketing dollars best spent at? Type of stuff. And then the sixth one, it may sound like it's a common sense thing, but it's improvement. It's actually sitting down with all that data and then figuring out what can I do better the next go around. If you're flipping, figuring out what happened in terms of data and from day one and the process of that flip, and then asking yourself a series of questions so you can either incorporate better processes, optimize the business, and really scale up and see it as a stepping up every single deal that you do. That framework that I just mentioned, I use it in 3 different businesses. I use it in my digital business as well, my coaching business. It's the same type of framework. You just tweak a couple of things here and there.
Yeah, and you know what? You're right too, because a lot of people do miss the KPIs and improvement part. Like they're running so hard. It's like, okay, good, let's go get someone. It's like, take a step back and look, qualified to buys, agreement sent, contract sent, signed, see where the drop is and optimize that.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be super complicated, man. Once you have it, once you set up a protocol, once you set up a standard operating procedure, the thing about it is we look for freedom, right? We look for why do most people start to hustle in real estate? Because they want financial freedom. What does that translate to personal freedom and freedom of choice, right? And you can't do that if you have to be stuck to the phone on every single deal. Even if you're on vacation and whatnot, you're not being present at those places. You can't do any of that stuff without systems. And that's the thing. So it may not be the sexiest thing, but I think it's the most important thing if you're trying to build an actual legitimate business is to systemize, automate, delegate, and then you're going to be able to elevate from there, right?
Yeah, that's huge. So you're saying you can help people that want to get into real estate. You do wholesale coaching, right? You'll show them how to wholesale, how to run that part of the business, and then you can also help them too once they grow, because normally wholesalers are starting as a one-man show and then growing.
Yeah.
You can help them grow into an actual business as well.
Right. Yeah. So we most of my students come in, they're solo operations, they're doing everything themselves, and I was doing the same thing when I started wholesaling. I was making the calls, I was going on the appointments, I was doing the dispo and the works, right? But once you have a sense of what that structure is, you can start plugging people into different areas of the business. That's really what I break down. I turn it into this methodical process that you start to see where the pieces go into. And mean, it really makes for something that can be delegated. It's hard to delegate it, I don't know, like just spaghetti on the wall, you know, you know
Right.
what I mean? So yeah. And don't get me wrong, man, like all the information is going to be out there. Like everything's out in YouTube University. You're going to have 1,000 ways of structuring deals. You're going to have 1,000 ways of marketing. There's so much, noise and shiny objects out there. The thing is to really just hone in on what works, right? And have it set in a linear fashion, which is what I think it's like what every business should do. Like Ford had it right. If you have an assembly line of processes, step 1, step 2, step 3, and you make everything instruction as opposed to theoretical, just insight, people actually, can push the button, can pull the lever, can make this call, can, call that number, can go to that website and do this, and that, and have that lined up. Like, bro, it becomes a blueprint. So.
Yeah. Now, when you're making the process too, how do you recommend people do that? Like, so you're saying you do it once, you come up with the process, you record it,
yeah,
and then you can delegate it. How are you recording that? What do you find the most efficient way is?
You're gonna laugh, but it's actually super simple. So anybody who's trying to build their systems and processes up, start from the end. Start from what's the ultimate outcome that you want, right? For example, if you're trying to create a process for cold calling, what's your outcome? Okay, my outcome is to have a pre-qualified seller. That's what I want.
Right.
Okay. If I want a pre-qualified seller, I'm going to take it a step back. Okay, what did I have to do before I got to that, pre-qualified seller? Okay, I had to have a set of questions. We pre-qualify based on condition, motivation, timeline, and price, right? That's our standard. So that's that. Okay, cool. I have the set of questions. And then what did I have to do before then? Well, I had to have the lead come into my CRM. How did that work? Okay, a web form. And then you start to put all these steps together that take you all the way back to, to step number 1, which was figuring out what list I was going to pull. So it's about going through the thing and then documenting everything backwards, because when you start from the end, you have it's interesting how the perspective changes, but you have a lot more clarity as to the process that you needed to have taken prior than imagining the process that you would need to take forward. There's so many options going forward, but when you go backwards, like you can usually come down to a handful of things, if that. But it just narrows down the options, makes everything a lot clearer. So reverse engineering and thinking from the end is huge. And the way that I document processes, I actually have. You can use systems like Trainual to put your videos in there and whatnot. One of my favorite tools is Loom. LOOM.com. And what that is, it's a screen share. You click on it and it starts recording your screen with a picture of you there. So anytime you're doing something, when you figure out, okay, cool, this is the process that I'm going to be doing for skip tracing. Okay, you click record on that screen, and then you start talking yourself through the whole process. As you're moving the mouse, okay, I'm gonna go to the top corner of this web page, and then I'm gonna click on this button, scroll down, and then I'm gonna go to the place where it says, whatever that is. So give yourselves instructions on what you're doing, then send that to a VA, have them clean it up, and now you have a system, you have a process in place. And the cool thing is that whenever you hire somebody, you just send them to that video, and it takes you 30 seconds to have that conversation and send that link or that set of videos. If you have a set of trainings, then the 30-45 minutes is going to take you to walk people over through that thing. You're buying yourself time every time you document.
Yeah, anyone listening to Loom is awesome. That's loom.com. We use it a lot too. It avoids a lot of phone calls for us because people have questions. I can just hop on. Hey, here's exactly what you need to do versus taking 20 minutes to call someone.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, cool, man. So if anyone wants to reach out, what's the best way to connect?
I'm pretty active on social media, so you can find me on Instagram at Rafael Cortez CEO. My YouTube channel, I drop a lot of content on business development, on entrepreneur mindset, and wholesaling, of course, and that's Rafael Cortez CEO as well. So I'm the same in every platform. And then if anybody wants to find out more about coaching or wholesaling, you can go to reiwholesaling.com. You download a PDF, a breakdown of the steps that I just mentioned. So it's a full structure and process there, but it's reiwholesaling.com.
Yeah, cool, man. And then hey, everyone listening too, we'll have those links in the show notes, so you can check it out on the website. Hey, Rafael, thanks for coming on, man. This was fun.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, everyone listening, yeah, go out there, crush it, and close some deals.